Follow me to my house. I'll follow you back. Driving home yesterday, and I needed to change lanes so I could make a right turn in a couple of blocks. I check my mirror and hit my turn signal. Well, the guy that was back a couple car lengths speeds up to try and block me in the left lane. Sorry, but I'm coming over. The guy lays on his horn for half a block. I laugh and wave. I even used all my fingers, not just the middle one. So the guy follows me for the next mile and turns into my neighborhood behind me. Not unusual since there are some apartments there. He follows me for a couple more turns and I start paying attention. The last 2 turns he would only make if he lived on the same street. Still, I have a couple neighbors that drive the same kind of car, so not too worried. When the guy drives past my house to the end of the block and turns the corner, I know he was just *king with me. Well, shit. Now he knows where I live and what I drive. I know nothing other than it's a guy driving a Subaru. Narrows it way down right. So I back out of my driveway and back around the corner. Sure enough, here he comes around the block and back out of the neighborhood. At this point, I decide to give the guy a taste of his own medicine and start following him. He jumps on the main road and heads north. I follow the guy for about 5 miles to the next town. He's driving okay, and I'm keeping a safe distance but on his tail enough that he knows I'm there. I have been watching him gesturing with his hands and swerving a little, not bad though, so I figure he's talking on the phone. I'm hoping he don't have a bunch of friends waiting wherever he's headed, but he also has a temp tag, and I still couldn't identify a thing other than the make of the car, so I keep going. He heads through a light and onto Main ST, and at that point I know he's on the phone with 911. Perfect. Sure enough, the guy pulls up to the police station and into a parking space. I roll up right next to the guy and hop out to go talk. He won't even look at me, so I stick my phone camera in his windshield and take a picture of the dude. Just then a cop walks up behind me and starts asking why I'm following the guy and videoing him. 2 more cops show up and start asking me a bunch of questions too. So I explained that he followed me first. They go over all the things that could go wrong with me following someone. So I go over all the things that could go wrong without me following him and that I was glad he came to them. Because now, even though I don't know who he is, they do and he knows it. So now I don't have to worry about him coming by my house later. They were all telling me how shook up the guy was. That he was pretty scared, LOL. I told them to let him know that following people to their homes probably wasn't the best activity for him. They agreed. Trying to buy a house for the most entitled couple I've ever met. Years ago, we decided to move closer to my parents. The housing choices were slim, but we found a dilapidated house close by. It looked like it needed lots of work and seemed overpriced for the area, say $200K. We organized a viewing to decide on it and brought my very practical dad with us for a second opinion. The viewing was conducted by the owners, and from the very beginning, they were off. They'd never sold a house before. We were the first people to view it, and they actually said to us during the viewing they were doing us a favor for offering us their hoarder's paradise house at such a great price. We told them we wanted to move closer to my parents, and I think they assumed we were desperate. We got home, had a think, and the next day offered the agent a price below the asking price which we believed to be suitable for its condition. Hours later, the agent calls back and says that the owners are going to pray on it for a week, then give us an answer. FYI, this time span is unheard of in my country. An answer is usually given in a day. A week later, they decline our offer. We offered the agent another $2K. The agent calls back and apologetically tells us the sellers refuse to give us an answer yet because A, they haven't even started looking for a house yet, and B, the owners believe they can sell it for more than the asking price now. So they will get back us when they were ready and we'd have to wait. We rescinded our offer. A month later, we find a house in the same area with a lot less work needed and at only $180K. Our offer, through the same agent, was accepted and we moved in 4 months later. During this time, the agent calls us and says the entitled sellers have found a house now and would like to offer us their house at the original asking price. We declined. I was interested in the progress of the old house. The sale sign had not moved, so I chatted to the agent. He told me we were the only offer in 6 months, and these people had been an absolute nightmare from the start. They expected the agent to pay for cleaners ready for the viewings and wouldn't take any advice to help with the sale. Remember, hoarder's house. He also said that they'd recently put a deposit on a house against his advice before selling theirs, so now the old house is going up for auction because they needed the cash. I instantly called my dad. He was looking for a property for my sister and had already seen the house. He was interested. So off we popped to the auction house on the day and bid for it. The owners were in the room but hadn't noticed us. When the hammer went down, Dad owned the house for $110K. He signed off the sale and paid the deposit just as the previous owners came to the office. Their faces were a picture. I gave them a shit-eating grin and left. I called my teacher by her schoolyard nickname in front of the class. I'll try to keep it short. My name has a silent letter in it, and I had this teacher that relentlessly not only kept pronouncing it, but over-enunciating it no matter how many times I corrected her. She just kept doing it. One day, I just finally snapped. Her name is really weird. I won't say it here, but those who know. Won't move your patrol car to let the ambulance out. They'll let your sergeant deal with you. This happened around 4th of July. There was a small fender bender and emergency services get called out. My towing company sends me out by accident, not realizing the flatbed at the scene could tow both vehicles. There was 1 ambulance and 5 police cruisers, 3 cruisers blocking the road, 1 directing traffic, and then the asshole who showed up after the scene was secured. Asshole felt the need to park his cruiser crossway diagonally in front of the ambulance, not necessarily blocking the path, but if anyone has driven an ambulance, they are a pain to reverse around obstacles. The EMTs asked the aholi to move his cruiser, and he literally said, "When I'm ready," and resumes chatting with the cop directing traffic. Another cruiser shows up, and it's a sergeant who knew me in the company I work for. He goes off to deal with the scene, and the EMTs rush to him to talk to him about moving the cruiser. I see his stomping in my direction and then walks to the cruiser, and the door was locked. He called for the cop that pulled in front, and he either didn't respond, ignore, or wasn't aware his superior was there. He looked pissed. He reached for the radio, but then he looked at me and asked what my drop fee was. 5 minutes go by, and he waves to me to get the cruiser. So I line up and sting it and dragged it out of the way, and the ambulance drivers waved and left the area. He told me to keep the cruiser hooked because he wanted to teach the asshole a lesson. He walked over to the cop directing traffic and asshole and alerted him that he was getting towed. He rushed back and demanded I put the car down and that it's not a funny joke, but I reminded him that all tows are fair in the county if the car is illegally parked. He looked at the sergeant, and the sergeant reminded him that the ordinance extends to emergency vehicles. Had to look this up. It's not. He tried to negotiate to 40, but my drop fee is 100. He hesitates, but he pulls 520s from his wallet, and I put his cruiser down. He got in his cruiser, and he didn't look too happy as he pulled away. The sergeant busts out laughing and said that kid needed that. He told me he's only been on the force less than a few weeks and that he was acting like he ran the place as if he was the sergeant. We shook hands, talked about work and Hot Wheels, and off I went $100 richer. School denies me my prescription. I told them I wanted to call a parent. Little did they know. Throw away because this story could totally dox me. I don't care if people figure out who I am from this post alone, but don't want everyone knowing my anonymous Reddit username. I will avoid/change details as much as possible and use fake names. I was abused by my dad's wife growing up. My mom fought long and hard to gain custody, but my dad was a good Christian with more money and he didn't fraternize with black people. Given our location, my mom stood no chance. She finally got custody when I was old enough to where my opinion mattered. I switched from a fancy, extremely competitive, snobby private school to the local public school by choice. I dyed my hair green and put a gay pride sticker on my car. Based on where I was coming from alone, I was a C student at fancy school, so it was not my grades. I was placed in all the honors and AP classes the school offered. Teachers didn't know what to think of me. I had green hair. This was considered absolutely shocking at the time, and my friends and I were bullied for many things, including this. My bumper sticker was definitely the most controversial topic in the entire school. But I was quiet. I came from fancy school. I paid attention in class. I was earning straight A's. Thankfully, although most of my peers shunned me, my teachers realized pretty quickly that I was a decent enough kid. I had a problem where I got migraines. Finally got a prescription for them, non-narcotic, and took it straight to the nurse's office because the district had a zero-tolerance policy and being in possession of even Tylenol would get you expelled for drug possession. Nurse, you're going to have to get the doctor's signature on this form. Me, why? It's a legitimate prescription with my name on it in the original bottle. Nurse, condescendingly, we're required to have a doctor's signature before we can dispense medications. Me, giving zero fucks. How do you think I got the prescription in the first place? Nurse decided to impress upon me the fact that I was powerless here and that there was absolutely nothing I could do except comply. I left the office stressed because I didn't have access to my migraine medicine and of course ended up stressing myself out into developing a migraine. Call me a Karen, But I felt entitled to go to the nurse's office and be dispensed my medication, and so I politely requested it be given to me. The nurse obviously told me no, so I asked for the principal. Got the assistant principal, AP, who simply reiterated district policy. Then it occurred to me that it was within my power to get my medicine, because I had a secret weapon. So I had to be sneaky. I'd like to call one of my parents. This phone call wasn't intended for my dad, a financial consultant. It wasn't to my mom, who worked in sales and advertising. Of course, I wasn't calling Stepmonster. But my stepdad, on the other hand, just happened to be our region's most famous radio talk show host at the time. And he was on the air for another 2 hours. The AP brought me the phone book, those existed back then, and I looked up the radio station's number in the yellow pages without the AP figuring out which business I was calling. Called the radio station and got the front desk. Of course, lots of people call them, ask for him, and get absolutely nowhere. But I knew they would interrupt his show, and he'd take the call if I told them I was his daughter Royal. In all my life, I had never had a situation that warranted me calling him at work. I was hoping he'd take the call while on air, but he didn't want to air what was likely private business, so he put commercials on while I explained the situation. Then I suppressed a shit-eating grin while handing the phone to the AP to talk to my stepdad, Bill. I managed a poker face. The AP didn't realize he was talking to Bill Jones when he dismissed my concerns and even suggested I should be denied my medication simply due to my pants, which I'd been wearing half the year without problem, but apparently were a uniform violation that day. AP basically explained that's just how it is and tough luck, and did not realize the shit he'd just stepped into. He hung up, dismissed me, and walked off looking pretty self-satisfied at winning his little power trip. I went to class feeling victorious. I hadn't won yet, but I'd played my cards and knew how it would turn out. Stepdad got back on air and immediately changed the topic of discussion to the ridiculousness of the district's medication policy. The phone lines lit up. Turns out lots of people wanted to air their complaints. I was sitting in class, migraine kicking in, but I was feeling satisfied that their lack of respect for me and all other more powerless students was hitting the fan. I timed it. 45 minutes after I was arrogantly denied my legally prescribed medication that I needed, the AP came into the classroom I was in, knelt down beside my desk, and whispered, "Hey, you want to come take your medication?" Fallout. Even more fun, because the school wanted desperately to expel me. But while I 100% can be a troublemaker when I want to be, evidence. This post, I never did anything for which I could have defensibly been disciplined. They had nothing on me. I knew it. They knew I knew it. And they knew they couldn't get away with making shit up because Bill Jones. All my friends were seniors, and the school admins didn't realize until the last day of school that I was a junior. I could see the panic in AP's eyes. "AP, you can take one summer course in English, and you'll be able to graduate early." Me, absolutely not. I haven't submitted any college applications, and most of the competitive schools I'll be applying to require more than the basic minimum to graduate. I'll be here for another year. "AP, would you like to take your high school classes at the community college instead? You'll get high school and college credit." This was a barely heard of program at the time, but they wanted to get rid of me so badly, I got to rack up a year's worth of college general education credits during my senior year. They tried to fuck me over, so I fucked back, and since they couldn't punish me, they rewarded me just to get me to go away. Apartment neighbors pump their jam at 7:30 a.m. I connect my phone to their speakers. "A little Ween with your morning coffee, my good sir? We've had an interesting playlist so far. Bloodhound Gang, Carly Rae Jepsen, Pantera, Cher, Come Sail Away as sung by Eric Cartman, NWA, John Spencer, Nelly, Diantword, Corrosion of Conformity, King Missile, More Pantera, Freak Nasty, PJ Harvey, Baha Men, MC 900 Foot Jesus." The theme songs from both Buffy and Angel. Lucius Jackson. Wow, I have a lot of Pantera on my phone. They keep trying to disconnect to play their own music, but if I have to hear the bass through our shared wall, I'm going to choose the tunes. Let's dance, buddy. Made a fake call about your baby being locked in your car with the keys? Now your car is locked with the keys inside again. Circa 2001. I was a AAA tow truck driver and working an overnight shift on a Friday. I received a call around 10 p.m. for a baby locked in a car with the keys inside. AAA policy is to attend to these type of lockout emergency calls before any other calls that may be waiting. I sped down the highway as fast as my truck could take me and reached the location, which was a local mall. I found the car that was parked in a far corner of the parking lot alongside another car. There were about a half a dozen people hanging around. I jumped out of the truck, identified the owner, and asked him if this was his vehicle. Yup, sure is. Okay, great, let me see what I can do, I said as I tried to peer into the windows, which were heavily tinted. I saw a glow coming from the stereo and could somewhat make out a blanket in the back seat, but the tint was so dark it was really tough to make out anything else. The child is in the back seat? Yeah, he's asleep. It took me about a minute to open the passenger's front door. As soon as the locking mechanism clicked, the owner of the vehicle reached in front of me, opened the door, and reached inside to grab his keys off the passenger's seat and a six-pack of beer off the floor. He stepped back and let out a little smartass chuckle. I poked my head inside the car and looked into the back seat. There was no baby. The driver was still standing close to me and was in the process of twisting off the bottle cap to his beer while holding his keys in the same hand. Instinctively, I snatched his keys away from him, tossed them back into the car, pushed the lock button on his door frame, and slammed it shut. Go fuck yourself. Now you can stay here all night, I said as I walked away and got back in my truck. No one said a word to me, and the driver stood there dumbfounded, holding his beer to his chest as I drove away. I called dispatch and explained what happened, and they made a note not to send any other drivers out to this account for a lockout situation.